I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Um, so Julie, are we going to wait a few minutes, do you think? So
Josh is joining now, so I would let him kick things off if you want,
okay,
and then you
yeah.
can jump in.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry for the wait, everyone. Doing meeting bounces today. So I see a few other people moving in here. All right, should we go ahead and jump in? Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're having a kind of a discussion on writing effective scientific narratives. A little bit off from usual of bringing in research-focused things, and this is more still research, but something that applies to all of us at every single point of our career. And Nick, if you want to take it away with introducing our speaker today.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, of course.
This is Nick from University of Central Florida, and I just mute myself. Today we are having a topic. I hope everyone find it interesting when you look at the title. Is how to write effective science narratives, and I think this topic is very important. I will say as equally important as a good quality of data and good science philosophies. So today we will have Dr. Beth Estes to give us a presentation on this topic. So before that, I just want to introduce Dr. Beth Estes. She is an academia support coordinator at Writing Studio at Vanderbilt University. She earned her PhD from Vanderbilt University in political science in 2017. And Beth is particularly interested in helping science and social science writers to craft compelling narratives and harnessing her social science background to contribute to research on writing assessment. So Beth, welcome to this seminar. And now I just hand over my microphone to you. So please share your screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that welcome, and thank you all for having me today and for your attendance. I do understand this is a bit different than you're used to, a topic you're a bit different than you're used to hearing about in these workshops, but I do hope that you find it useful nonetheless. As they've said, everyone does a lot of writing throughout their career, no matter what you do, really. And specifically, thinking about writing as storytelling, I think can be a very effective way to begin to craft narratives that others are interested in reading, right? Instead of just regurgitating data and information that you may have about a certain topic that you want to convey. So I will share my screen with you guys. Let me get open what I need to. Oh, hang on. What is this? Okay, 1 second. Okay. All right. So as I said, we're going to be talking about writing effective scientific narratives today. And I do want to tell you a little bit about the writing studio at Vanderbilt for those of you who are local to Vanderbilt, so you know what we do. And for others, you probably have a center similar to this on whatever campus you're on. And a lot of their ideologies and the way they practice will be very similar to ours. So I do encourage you to check out your local writing center at whatever. So the writing studio at Vanderbilt in particular, we serve any writer, any project at any stage. So first years all the way up through faculty, any type of writing, and whether it's brainstorming all the way up through a finished draft. We do it with a 50-minute one-on-one writing consultations. Other centers may have a 30-minute consultation, whatever variation in time, but especially for more advanced writers, most centers will have the option to extend those appointments for a more intensive type of writing. Vanderbilt Writing Studio also has writing groups as well as workshops for students and faculty, along with faculty resources for their classroom. So again, a lot of this type of thing is available at all institutions. So please do check out your local institution for information for your school, but vanderbilt.edu/writing is the web page for ours. So when we think about structuring science writing in general, any type of academic piece, they typically fall into a similar pattern. And I wanted to first take a look at a pretty standard version broken down into chunks. And what I'll actually do is stop my screen share for just a moment so that I can send you a packet in the chat that I would like for everyone to have. Let's see, where is it at? Okay. So here's the handout packet that I have. I would like for you all to utilize that and to go to the second page of that document, and I will share my screen again and we can see it there as well. But I gave you the PDF, so it'll be a little bit easier to read if you would like to use the PDF instead. This is a bit small print for me, but I'm wondering if we could have a volunteer from the group that would be willing to read Move 1. So that first big chunk of this particular version of a scientific narrative.
Yeah, I'll volunteer to read that first part. So just move 1.
Yes.
So the increasing interest in high angle of attack aerodynamics has heightened the need for computational tools suitable to predict the flow field of the aerodynamic coefficients in this regime. Of particular interest and complexity are the symmetric and the asymmetric separated vortex flows, which develop out slender bodies as the angle of attack is increased. Do I keep going through step 2 or? All right.
So move 1 through 3 first. Move 1, yes. Or
sure.
Step 1.
The viscous influence on the separation lines and the unknown three-dimensional 3D shape of the vortex wake are some of the main flow features that must be modeled in the construction of a computational method to properly treat this problem. Among the many potential flow methods developed in attempting to solve body vortex flows are early two-dimensional 2D multi-vortex methods. 2D time-stopping vortex models are included boundary layer considerations and a quasi-3D potential flow method that uses source and vortex elements. Linear unseparated potential flow models, as well as purely viscous models, are not mentioned here. A survey of the various methods may be also found in reference 10. The potential flow methods are of a special interest because of their ability to treat 3D body shapes and their separated vortex flows using a simple and relatively inexpensive model.
Okay, cool. So what is going on in this first big move? Anyone?
A lot of words describe different structures of aircraft.
Yes. Essentially a lot of background information, right?
Yeah.
We're sort of setting up the parameters of the topic that we're interested in. We're giving some key information for the reader so we have a foundation before we move into what is move 2. So move 2 is much shorter. Who would like to read that one?
Well, I volunteer myself. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so however, the previously mentioned methods suffer from some limitations, mainly concerning the treatment of the vortex weak formation and its interaction with the body. The first group of methods cannot treat 3D flows and is limited to very slender bodies. The second group of computational method is time consuming and therefore expensive, and its separation prediction is not sufficient accurate. Both the method in this group and the method in reference 9 suffer from the dependency on too many semi-empirical inputs and semi-empirical inputs and assumptions concerning the vertex weak and its separation. The steady 3D nonlinear vertex lattice method, upon which the present method is based, eliminates many of these limitations by introducing a more consistent model, but it can treat only symmetrical flow cases.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what is happening in move 2?
So it's giving some like like a review on the previous studies. Yeah,
And how is it differentiating itself from move 1? What have we moved? How have we changed our focus?
Maybe the gap in the research.
Good. So we've essentially gone from here's the background, big picture stuff into more of a funnel down to, but here's the limitations of what we know about this, right? So we need to, here are the gaps that we need to fill. And you can tell that not only because there's a line that clearly divides them in this example, but the authors use the word however, right? That's what we call in writing a signpost. Some people try to avoid using signposts because they want to be more creative than that. Don't try. Use your clear signposts when you write to signal to the reader, here's when I'm moving into a new part of what I'm saying. So move 1 is very much, here's the background. Move 2 is, however, here's the problem with what we already know, or here's the limitations of what we already know, and where I'm going to start to try to come into that picture, or where I'm targeting the limitations. Great. So what about move 3? This is the shortest of all. So lucky number 3.
I can.
Great.
The present work extends the use of the last model to asymmetric body vortex flow cases, thus increasing the range of flow problems that can be investigated. In addition, an effort is made to improve the numerical procedure to accelerate the convergence of the iterative solution and to get a better roll-up of the vortex lines representing the wake.
Good. So what is happening here?
I think they're talking about what they're doing,
Yes.
their current work.
Right. So it's very straightforward in that way. It's very systematic. We have one sort of establishing the territory, as this model calls it, laying stake to what area are we researching, establishing a niche within that territory. What are the authors particularly interested in exploring within that broader context? And then finally occupying it, saying this paper will do this. And the words this paper will, or the present research will, whatever, all of those are wonderful to use because again, it's a strong signpost to the reader. Where is this author coming in to a picture that otherwise contains a lot of different scholars who've talked about this before. It makes it very clear where your contribution is. So this standard structure is a very typical way to think about scientific moves. You've seen it in pretty much everything you've ever read, to some degrees better than others, right? Some people do it better than others. And ideally, this is a basic structure for anything that you might write. Sort of this funneling down. Again, we're starting broad because you want to pull the reader in and try to attach to as many readers as possible by starting out somewhat broad before you get very specific about what you're doing. That way, folks who are interested in a wide variety of topics, even somewhat relating to what you're researching, could potentially read that first bit and be like, okay, yeah, I'm interested. Keep going. So one of the issues, though, with getting started in all of this, how do I actually write up a scientific paper, scientific moves in my research, is because there's honestly a lot of data, a lot of thoughts, a lot of research and information you could include. So a lot of writers get stuck because they aren't sure how to make their way through all of that information. They could theoretically include a bunch of stuff in their paper, and they can't seem to figure out the forest for the trees, almost type of a situation. It's also hard for writers to know how to captivate their audience. They're not sure what is the hook they want to use. How do they get their audience interested in the nitty-gritty details of their research? So we like to think about one way to get around this problem that everyone faces, honestly, in any discipline that is writing long pieces or more advanced pieces, is making sure that you are writing a story. And we think that stories are so important for writing because basically the human brain is hardwired to be interested in stories. So if you think early on, before we had papers, honestly, before we had a lot of things, we had stories. People sat around the fire, they told each other stories about their lives, and that's how people survived. At a certain point, human survival actually depended on this. If you're sitting around the campfire with your family, someone says, well, I went over into the woods there and almost got eaten by a bear. Other family members know not to go over to the woods. That's a little bit basic of a rendition of it, but essentially stories are what kept people alive and gave them the information they needed to survive in their world. So over time, the human brain has been hardwired to pay attention to stories, even ones that won't save their life. The brain doesn't know that any story won't save your life, so it tries to latch on just in case there might be critical information there. The other thing about stories is they work because they satisfy our curiosity and our need to know what happens next. Again, that's an evolutionary thing that has occurred over centuries with the human brain. And so all we're doing when we try to write stories for our audiences through our research is to tap into that and capitalize on that need that we have to pay attention. So there are a few different models or ways that you can think about writing stories and story structure to keep in mind as you're writing to make sure that you are doing this for your audience. One of the most popular, easiest models is called the OCAR model, and this is from the book Writing Science. And OCAR simply stands for opening, challenge, action, and resolution. So if you think about any story that you've ever read in a book, fiction, or watched in a movie, it generally follows this pattern. There is some sort of opening scene where we learn about the people who are involved, we learn about what they do, who they are. We then are presented with some sort of challenge for the plot, right? There's some issue that the characters are facing that they must figure out. There's an action to be had to resolve the challenge and fix the issue. And then there's the resolution. There is whatever the conclusion is. How do they all end up? Usually everyone lives or everyone dies, something dramatic like that. Hopefully it's not that dramatic in your research, but there is some ultimate resolution that will result. So that model is essentially present in, like I said, everything you ever watched, if you think about it and break it down. So we want to try in our research as we're writing this up to follow this model, or it's one way at least to think about it. So again, in your research, it might be the opening being, here's the lay of the land in terms of this topic. Here's what we know about my topic so far. The challenge being, what do we not know? Where are the gaps? Where does what we do know fall short, or where is it contradictory? What missing information is there? What action am I going to take? What research am I actually going to do to resolve this challenge or to make headway on this issue? And then finally, what do I find? It's pretty straightforward, but sometimes thinking about it this way can help get you into that streamlined mindset to find out what is the actual big picture that I'm talking about. Ideally, if you are able to break it down into these 4 quick parts, this is an elevator pitch, right? You're at a conference, you're with peers, you need to quickly tell them what your research is. This should be it, right? You should ideally be able to distill it down into about 4 sentences at the very high level. Here's what it's about, here's what the issue is, here's what I did, and here's what I found. The thing I will mention at this point, if you're writing grants or you're trying to get funding for research, obviously you're not going to have the resolution, you're not going to have the final results. So there, your focus really needs to be on the challenge, making sure that the challenge is very, very compelling, such that the reader really wants to invest in you to figure out what the answer is to that challenge. So you can almost think about that as a movie trailer, right? There's not a solution. We don't know what happens to the characters, but the issues that they're facing have to be compelling enough to make us go watch the movie. And that's sort of the same with like a grant, except the only difference is with a grant, you're essentially showing them your movie trailer and asking for funding with a bunch of other movie trailers. And so yours has to win out to make the rest of the movie, essentially. But okay, so this is one model that you can follow. Another very similar one that I like a lot is called the ABT model. And this is from the book, Houston, We Have a Narrative. And so the ABT essentially stands for and, but, therefore. So when you think about people who can't tell a good story, think about the person in your life who just rambles and they just throw information at you. And it's like, when is this going to stop? There's not even a story here. They're doing something called an and model, an AAA model. So what they're doing is they're, for example, saying something like, you know, I woke up this morning and I went to the store to buy some milk and bread. I bought the milk and bread. I checked out at the store and I walked home, and then I fed my dog, and then I went to work, and then I ate lunch, and we're just already bored, right? This is just monotonous information about their day. Versus the storyteller who says, I got up this morning, I went to the store because I wanted to buy some bread and milk, but they were out of milk. So I had to go talk to the supervisor at the dairy section. He had to go look in the back, and they didn't have any milk still. So then I ended up buying orange juice, whatever. It's already more interesting because we have something that happened during the day that the protagonist, me trying to buy my milk, had to navigate and had to get out of. So your brain is already piqued by that. You want to know, well, what did you do? How did you get the milk? Or what did you do instead? Because I want to know, if I go to the store, what's going to happen to me if they don't have any milk. And that's the whole premise, is there's something that the main character has to figure out. And that is the crux. That is what the person listening is waiting for to hear. And that is why you get bored by people who don't ever have a conflict in their stories, is because there is no story, right? So as you're working on this, you can always think of it even more simply as, here's a bunch of information we know about this topic, however, but here's what we don't know, and this is what I need to find out, therefore, here's what I'm going to do. I think people, whenever they are writing up their research, have the answers, kind of, right? Like you already know the solution, so then it's easy to just get into, here's all the cool stuff I found, without clearly articulating, but what was I trying to solve for? What were the stakes of doing this research? Why does this research matter to anyone? And that's what you want to make sure that you're identifying. So all of these things really align pretty well. You know, we have opening, challenge, action, resolution, and, but, therefore, even back to the basic model of establishing a territory, finding the niche within the territory, and then occupying it. Any one of these structures is fine to use. It's really a preference thing, which one resonates most with you. It applies most to your research. But I know you all are researchers at all times. So what I would like to do now is to give you a few minutes to think about a research topic that you are working on, your research agenda now, or maybe something you just finished if you're fresh between projects, or something that you are about to get started on, and try to identify the story. What is the narrative that you are telling in your current or past or future research? I'm going to give you 5 or so minutes, 5 to 7 minutes now to think about that. And I want you to try, just pick one of these systems and try to identify each piece as succinctly as you can. Part of the goal here, remember, is to get to the heart of it. And we'll talk about why that's so important in a minute. But you really do want to get clarity on the big picture of what you're doing. Okay, so I'm going to set my timer, give you a few minutes. Any questions about what I'm asking you to do? Good? Okay, cool. take just a minute or so and finish up. Okay, great. So what I would like to do now is to actually, if we could pop them into breakout groups, that would be fantastic. If we could do 2 or 3 per group, and just give folks about another 7 minutes to talk about whatever they came up with one another. I don't have access to do that, so I'm not sure if someone else is able to.
Yeah, I believe our current host probably has the access.
Sure.
I believe that is Jody or
Julie, or
Julia.
are you Rick hosting this?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. How many do we need? How many rooms should I
3.
create?
It looks like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be good.
Yeah.
Okay, 5, assign automatically, assign manually. Let
These are-
participants choose room.
Sure.
All right,
Thanks.
open all rooms.
Okay, if everyone
Okay.
would just pick a room until it has a couple people, then pick a different one.
Where can I get a room? I cannot find where is the room.
Do what?
Click on the breakout rooms and it'll give you a list of the 5 and you can click join.
Where is the breakout room? I
It's at the
cannot find.
bottom. It's 2 from where it says share screen. You'll see
Oh, okay, okay.
share
okay.
screen, record breakout rooms, reactions.
You might pick one that already has a couple of people in it. So you
Yeah,
have some
but-
people to chat with.
Okay, I need to find where is the.
Because
breakout
room 5 is piling up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe do 1 or
Yeah.
2.
Mhm.
4 and 5, 2 and 2, and 2 and 1. Currently.
There you go.
okay. Only one left here. Maybe.
I'm gonna pop over.
Oh, okay, I got, yeah.
Great.
So Rick, can you see who's in each room?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, if you open up the breakout room link, Julie, you can see who's in who. Which
Oh, I
group.
can see you can arrow it down. Okay. I've joined breakout rooms, but I've never really messed with it.
Looks like 3 and 4 are still without participant.
I think most of the students have joined, so I'd say we're
Mhm.
good to go.
Okay.
Yeah. She's already gone to the second room.
if we can go ahead and close the breakout groups, so they'll be back in a minute. That would be good.
Doing that now.
Awesome.
This will close in 1 minute.
Yeah, great. Okay, everyone should be back now, I believe. So let's talk about how that went. Would anyone care to share their scientific narrative for us? I know you guys were talking about it. I was observing you and you were doing fantastic. So
Would you like me to share mine?
yes, that would be perfect.
Okay, so I did the OCAR, won the opening challenge, action, and resolution. So the opening to my, I guess, topic is that there are 2 phases of nuclear waste that may be present in nuclear waste processing streams. The 2 phases are solid and liquid. The challenge is how can we monitor both the solid and liquid phases simultaneously? And I guess the action following that challenge is combining Raman and ATR FTIR with data fusion can allow us to monitor both phases simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And the resolution is that both phases are monitored simultaneously.
Very good. So one small thing, why does it matter?
I guess because it allows for better understanding of what's happening in the process streams in terms of looking at both the solids and the liquids. So if there's like a fault or something, or if there's a composition change that can be detected.
Okay. So what greater impact does that have though? I'm putting you on the spot, I know.
No, it's fine.
You're doing fantastic.
I guess it would allow for the nuclear waste processing to be more robust in terms of like if there's things that change in the process or potential faults and stuff like that, being able to detect that earlier so that the process can run more smoothly and not have to stop to fix things necessarily.
Okay, so ideally there is nuclear waste happening, right? We are trying to deal with it, but because we can't identify which of these states things are in, we can't as effectively do our jobs, essentially.
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. Always, even, like you did really good, but even thinking bigger than that, right? So if you're telling someone who knows nothing about the topic, like why should I, as someone who doesn't study this at all, even care about nuclear waste, right? So starting that broad. A lot of people that do like biomedical stuff will even start with like, cancer is a thing, cancer is bad. And then they'll talk about some very specific protein and some you know, like way more fine-grained than just like cancer is bad. So, and that feels like almost a given, right? But it's helpful to even go that broad early on to pull in as many people as possible before you get into the solid, you know, like the state they're in and what you're actually going to be doing. Great job. Good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, in the interest of time, we are going to move on because you did so fantastic. I don't think we necessarily need to hear another story, but keep your stories in mind as you're writing. And one of the reasons that I often talk about the importance of having the narrative is also because it can help you streamline what to include later, right? So a lot of times people will have various research that they've done, experiments, data they've collected, etc., and they're not quite sure what all belongs and what doesn't in the final product. So they just put everything that's interesting to them in the overarching paper or final product, but it may not be all explicitly tied back to the main thing they're trying to do. So I like to think of it as if I'm watching a movie, like a romantic comedy, which I love, right? And there's a main character who likes to bake. But obviously the point of a romantic comedy is, does this person get with the person they're trying to get with? So we don't need to have a 30-minute derailment talking about this person baking pies. It's interesting, this person is a baker, it's cool, but it doesn't really help further the main thing we want to know, which is, do they get together or not? So as you're writing your papers, you can always think, does what I'm talking about right now, is it really necessary for that main story that I'm trying to tell? And that can help you kind of decipher what really is critical versus what is supplementary that you could explore in another paper, maybe, but isn't really the punchline of what you're doing. So the other thing we want to talk about briefly when we're thinking about writing narratives is writing good narratives or good stories. So just because a story has these elements, just because we have some arc that we're working with, doesn't mean it's interesting, right? We've all read or seen a bad book or movie. So what does a successful story look like? And the model is actually without the last S, which bothers me. But anyway, we'll just try to move on from that. So successful stories are simple. There is a core idea in the story, a very centralized main point you're trying to make or discover. Successful stories are unexpected. So there's something interesting about what you're doing that isn't just the obvious next thing for people to research. It's something that an angle that other people haven't really thought about in the past. It is concrete. So there are very specific things, concrete examples that the reader can latch onto, concrete evidence versus just theoretical discussion. The story is credible, which in sense of grant writing, that's more about, can this person actually do it in the amount of time with the amount of money they say they're going to do it in? Is it a credible endeavor? But for a finished paper, credible is more, do we believe this? Is the evidence supportive enough to make the claims that they're actually making, or have they sort of extrapolated too much from the data that they actually have to the bigger problem? Successful stories are emotional. So again, in the terms of grant writing, which a lot of the importance of narrative comes into play in grant writing. The emotional piece is that I'm the one that must do this. This research is very important and I need to do it. In a finished product, the emotional piece is really, why does this matter? Why should anyone care? I did this cool thing, but what impact does this really have on a regular person? And again, the farther out you can articulate that impact, the better, the more important the paper is to the world, right? So we always want to try to take it as far removed from the actual research as possible in terms of the impact it could potentially have downstream. And then finally, successful stories are ultimately stories. So they do have these pieces that make up a whole. They're not just a regurgitation of data. There is a narrative arc that we're trying to tell. So if you guys can think about your stories, which of these elements do you think you are doing well at currently in your narrative form, and which of these do you know, yeah, I probably need to work on that and refine that aspect? So anyone can volunteer. An area where you, again, think you're doing good, your story's rocking it out on this metric, but then here's one where you know you could use some work.
So Beth, I think myself is I think the concrete side I think that's my better side.
Okay.
I can put those examples I think I when I do my writing, my concrete side is better, but my emotional side is not that good. Especially for me, I grew up in a different country, but when I write this, I feel like it's hard to grab other people's heart really quickly. So I think that part is my weakness.
Yeah, well, it's good that you're identifying that, right? So you know now maybe to spend some time thinking about why does this research matter, right? Like I've got all this concrete information, I've got the research that I need to prove the point, but what benefit does me having done this research have on other people or other processes? And sometimes that does take creativity, right? You have to think about like, okay, here's what this affects, and then what does that affect? And then what does that affect? And then how could that ultimately down the line have this bigger impact? It doesn't have to be my research directly has immediate implications for a broader picture. It could be, it affects A to B to C, which ultimately contributes to D, which is a thing somebody might care about. But the ability to frame your research as mattering to honestly different people, and you can frame it in different ways anytime you write it, is a skill that is very important to get things funded, to get things published, to get the recognition that your research deserves. Really hinges on your ability to get creative with the impact versus just, well, it was really fun for me to do this research, right? So just taking that time to spend there. But great, anyone else?
Yeah, I'll volunteer for it again. I think I probably excel in being credible. I feel like I have a good logistical mindset of how things can be accomplished. Perhaps definitely struggle with being unexpected. I feel like the work I do is fairly incremental to what's out there. Perhaps approaching it from a different way, but it's not like the new thing.
Got it. Yeah. I would honestly say the three that people say the most is the emotional, the unexpected, and the simple. Like they feel like they're not connecting it to bigger pictures, or they don't appreciate the added value of what they're doing, which is what you're saying with the unexpected. You know, I think you just want to play up the elements of it that are a new way of doing it, and what the new way of doing it, what the added benefit of that is. So even if the topic or the question itself seems expected, right, that we know somebody needs to figure this out, maybe one angle of your approach is interesting and unique, and maybe has, once we use it for this, has implications for other types of research, right? And so using this approach, even talking about that, right? Like now that we know this approach helps us understand this, look at all the other things this approach could help us do. So sometimes there's even an element of the importance of the methodology, even beyond the topic itself, that you can highlight and bring to the forefront of your research. The good news is you can craft these things and to highlight what you want to highlight, right? And you are the master of that. So you are in control of what the reader takes away as the innovative piece. But I think it's just helpful if you can find the aspect of it that is innovative and perhaps a little bit unique in that way and exploit it on your papers, the more interest you'll gain for the piece itself. Cool. So that is pretty much the gist of it, right? Making these narratives, making sure that they are standing out in these ways. What questions do you guys have for me, either about anything we've talked about today or anything else about writing these things, getting them how they need to be? We have just a couple more minutes left. And I did provide in the handout packet that I gave you at the beginning, there are a couple of other full-length articles or samples later on in the packet where you can read those as examples of narratives that you can kind of work with in your processes. But any questions for me before I let you guys go?
Hi, Beth. I have one question.
Yeah.
For the opening that you mentioned that we need to talk broad to get more audience, but I'm struggling to how broad it is because we wouldn't like to talk at the beginning of the whole story, right? We need to focus on our small research area. This paper is only talk about a small area or small topic, but do we need to talk about the whole picture of this problem or more focus? I'm struggling on that. Thank you.
So yeah, I think really it's about that first sentence, just like one sentence where you go as broad as you can, such that your neighbor could read it and be like, yeah, interesting. I would like to know more about that. Even though 2 sentences deep, they may totally lose the ability to read it because it's too technical, right? But at least that initial grab should be something that sets the stakes so high that basically anyone with a relatively intelligent person could understand why you're interested in this area of research or this problem, and then to quickly funnel it. So it's not that you're spending a page, hashing out the bigger picture. It's more just a line or 2.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, I'll make a comment. I like the fact, so for those of us who are very old and went through and argued with our technical writing professors back in the day, and I'm older than most of the people on the call, I'm very pleased to hear that we're not still in the idea of C-spot run sort of technical writing. So I like the idea of how you've constructed this, because many of us have argued over the years that, and those of us who write fairly densely and more as English majors than as engineers, I kind of like the fact that you've structured this way, because often it can be very dry, the old style of technical writing. So I like where you've gone with this. So I do appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, obviously there are parts of it that are going to feel very dry and technical. It's a little bit unavoidable just to get it out, right? Like, here's what I did, here are the metrics, here's all the data that you need to understand. But it's really about adding those sentences here and there that make it that story. Like when you transition between ideas, having those signpost words. However, here's the problem I'm solving. This paper is going to do this.
And that's a very good point, because one of the things that we often see lacking is the logical connection through the paper, and how one paragraph, how one sentence leads to the next. There's often then a miracle occurs where you've left out the connection of how you started to where you got to the point you are. So this is all writing a narrative, writing a story makes a lot of sense to, like, those of us who come from, I'm an engineer, but I do write more like an English major. So this makes a lot of sense to me.
To be fair, basically every writer I work with struggles to put the transitions between things, no matter the field. That's not
absolutely
a problem. So I think everyone's in good company with that. I think thinking about that in terms of what we call meta talk is important, where you basically take a step out of what you're doing and explain to the reader what you're about to tell them. And very like, now we're going to do this. Now we're going to do this. Here's how this directly connects with this. So just keep that in mind as you're going. The reader doesn't live in your head. And so it's helpful to walk them through in that way. But I know we're out of time. You guys have been fantastic. Feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions in the future, or I'm sure your local writing centers will be glad to talk to you about this stuff as well. So
thank you for joining us as well, Dr. Estes. This has been
Thank you.
really engaging.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
we
thank you.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
See you all soon.